You're listening to the Decidedly podcast with Sanger Smith and Sean Smith. Our mission is to help business owners like you defeat bad decision-making so you can improve your health, wealth, and relationships. We do this by digging deep into the stories and expertise of our guests and distilling their knowledge into actionable wisdom for you to carry into your life and business. If you're new to the show, welcome. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. If you prefer to watch this week's episode, head on over to YouTube for the full video. Now, let's get into this week's episode and defeat bad decision-making in your life and business.
So the biggest thing is we have this white wall behind us because we're in the new studio.
A different white wall.
We haven't finished it yet, so this is going to get fixed or improved on, I guess.
Yeah, big move.
So tell me about what was the most difficult decision when you moved? Because you moved your whole office, not just the studio.
What was the most difficult?
Yeah, you had a lot of decisions to make. What was the most difficult?
Well, we're in the process of making some still. Well, like we haven't picked out every single little piece of furniture that we write.
Right.
But I would say the most maybe impactful decision was like realizing what would hold us back from making progress and then making the decision that will allow us to move forward. So for example, like nobody on our team we're not interior decorators. We don't have an eye for design. We don't know, should the couch be on this side of the room or that side of the room? Mm-hmm. And so that along with many other things have to happen when you move. You got to change your address on everything. You got to coordinate with you got to agree to the terms with the new landlord. You got to learn new habits about, just how the business is going to operate in this space versus that space. So you got to make decisions about systems. You got to coordinate all the phones and the internet. And like, there's so much and then you also have to design the space.
And I found it challenging when I've moved offices because you always have to move to an office that's going to fit you 3 or 4 years past the move.
Yeah.
Right. So you always end up getting
you don't want to move like 6 months later.
You need a bigger space than what you need right now.
So I would say the most impactful decision wasn't the hardest, but it was like the inertia of that. We wouldn't have necessarily done this if we didn't recognize our skills and strengths and weaknesses, is saying, hey, we're going to stop thinking about and asking questions to ourselves and even talking about how the interior of the space is going to be designed until we have a design plan from the designer.
Was that hard to keep from talking about it?
Well, it was not for me. Other people kept asking me and I said, stop.
Yeah.
Don't. Okay, so I sent everything to the designer. I'm thinking the couch would look really good over here. Stop. Don't care. Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. Don't care. I don't want to think about it. Now we can focus our energy on what are the things that we can do. Otherwise, I think it's really easy to waste a bunch of time and pretend to be productive and trick yourself into thinking you're making progress by talking about crap that you're really not in a position to even do.
Yeah.
So that was probably the best decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're over here. I love the space.
Yeah. There's like maybe a tiny little eensy bit of fear because bigger space. Like, oh no.
Right. You're taking on a bigger financial commitment. So there's some fear about that. Right.
Well, yeah, a little bit. Speaking of fear though, our guest today, Akshay Nanavati, is a former Marine. He suffered from PTSD, overcame addiction, and then decided to also overcome fear. He did that with some crazy methods that you won't hear anywhere else. He spent multiple weeks at a darkness retreat where he couldn't even see his hand in front of his face. He did it more than once. He's gone on expeditions, adventures in the Arctic and the Antarctic. Most recently, he drug a 400-pound sled on skis across Antarctica. He's done some wild things. He has some great perspectives, specifically on fear. His book, Fearvana, was endorsed by the Dalai Lama. So if you are struggling with fear or you're struggling broadly with emotions that you don't know how to contend with, our conversation with Akshay is going to be really impactful in your life, I think. So stick around. I'm Sanger Smith with my dad, Sean Smith, and this is Decidedly. Thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me.
I think the most darkness I've experienced was crying as a 5-year-old for my mom to come like plug my nightlight back in. Gotcha. So you're like, sometimes, you meet people just like, dude, I can't relate.
I get that, believe it or not.
Yeah. I bet you run into a lot of people that can't relate to what
I don't understand it, but yeah.
Yeah, what you're doing. Oh man. Yeah, I want to get into that. I want to start with kind of how how your story started in the Marines. You had a crazy job. You were the guy walking in front of the Humvee that's catching all the shit. Like, is that a job you volunteer for?
I did not volunteer for it. The way it worked is I got assigned to it, but I was more than happy to do it. I would have rather it been me than somebody else. But essentially the job was anytime our vehicle convoy crossed a danger zone. So for example, a bridge where there very likely could have been a bomb, two Marines, me and one of the Marine, had to walk across and sweep the danger zone. So sweep the bridge. So one on the left, one on the right, walk, make sure there's no bombs. And once we clear the danger zone, we wave the vehicles through, get back in the vehicle and move on. So yes, me and one other Marine had that job of checking for bombs first. So needless to say, it was it was a dangerous job.
Well, and I would think that the enemy knows that as well. So they know you're going to get out and you're taking pop shots all over the place.
So there was this constant dance of once we figure out what they're doing, we adapt, and then they adapt to us, so on and so forth. So when we were out there, I went in 2007. So it was a little bit later towards the end of the war. So our vehicles had the capacity to stop radio frequencies. We had something on our MRAP. I cannot for the life of me, it's been a minute since I was in Iraq, remember what it's called now, but we had something that could block radio signals. So the only way they could now hit us with IEDs, which are improvised explosive devices, was through wires. And somebody would have to sort of click it. So in the distance, that was another thing we'd always be keeping our eye out on. Or, rigged fuel canisters. We found a few of those from time to time, things like that.
Is that something that you can ever get desensitized to?
You like after the war, or while I'm there?
I guess during it, I imagine the first time that's very nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Does it ever stop being as intensely nerve-wracking as it is the first time?
Very much so, and this is the big danger in counterinsurgency warfare versus conventional warfare. When you have a clear enemy, you're in firefights. There's almost a simplicity to that. In counterinsurgency warfare, which is what we dealt with in Iraq, you never know who the enemy is for real. You're mostly walking through normal towns. 99.9% of people there are normal people trying to live their lives, take care of their families, just as the rest of us are at home, right? But you never know where somebody out there is someone who wants to kill you in the midst of a normal civilian population. But the point of that is to say is that you can move through months without anything happening and get very complacent. That was one of the core mantras in Iraq, was complacency kills. And I think the same thing applies to relationships, to business. It's a mantra that's lived with me to this day. Now, in normal life, it's not a literal kill you, at least not instantly. Out there, it was. But that was the danger, is if you get complacent because nothing happens for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And it was, to your point, it was very easy to get complacent. Oh, I'm not going to find anything. Haven't found anything in weeks. We're going to be fine. But that was the moment. And I'm not saying I was perfect at it. Nobody was. But we constantly had to bring ourselves back into staying hypervigilant, because that could save the lives of the people around you, of your buddies.
I remember years ago, we had a leader in an organization I was in, and somebody called him they announced him. He was going to do a presentation. They said, "It's our fearless leader." And he got upset with that person. He said, that's not a compliment.
Yeah.
He goes, if you're fearless, that means you don't recognize the danger.
I completely agree.
You need to have courage. You need to recognize the fear. You need to have fear. You're never not going to have it. You just learn how to deal with that. How do you deal with the fear of that kind of environment?
In my case, by the time I had gone out there, I had gotten very acclimatized to fear. So when I was younger, I used to be scared of everything, scared of open water, scared of heights, scared of Ferris wheels, roller coasters, everything. And once I joined the Marines, I started systematically confronting those fears. So I went skydiving, mountain climbing, rock climbing. I used to do free soloing, nothing like Alex Honnold level, but still climb high enough rock walls where if I fell, I would have died. So I trained in the experience of fear to the point that I was comfortable with it. Now, this is not to say the fear went away. As you just said, it's not that the fear goes away, but you develop a healthy relationship to it. That's the very essence of everything I do now. My book, Fearvana, my work, Fearvana, is about building a positive relationship with fear because it's the most important skill to master. Courage is the most important virtue. Whether you want to build a business, get a healthy relationship, do anything epic in life, you're going to need courage because doing anything is hard. Anything worthwhile is hard. It's scary. And if you want to go somewhere where you've never been before, you're going to have to do something you've never done before. That's scary. With that fear, you're going to have courage to move through it. So the fundamental skill to master is to develop that relationship with fear. And so by the time I went to Iraq, I had gotten a very healthy relationship with it that there were many times, and this is something concrete that we assessed, that we'd go on a mission and other people in my squad would have been a lot more heightened nerves, whereas I was a lot more centered. Not because I was stronger or somehow more special, only because I had trained in the experience of fear more than the average person at the time. And Iraq only further reinforced that, which the training to this day continues with all the things that I do, from expeditions in Antarctica and much more.
Was that a conscious decision to embrace the fear and train in fear, or did you just realize it had happened over time?
It was very much a conscious decision to do that. When my first experience was that actually when I was 13 years old, I'd gone on a family trip to New Zealand with my parents, and there was a bungee jumping thing there, bungee jumping over a bridge. And I remember being terrified, but before this was when I was scared of everything. So something in me said, all right, I want to stop being scared. I want to do it. And I was terrified. When I stood over the cliff looking out at the rapids, I thought to myself, this is crazy, but they counted down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you leap. That was a starting point, but enlisting in the Marines is the trigger that changed my life. Before this, I was doing a lot of drugs, alcohol in high school, and watching the movie Black Hawk Down was the trigger that got me out of drugs into the military, which was scary. A lot of fear when I go to boot camp. The drill instructors are constantly screaming in your face. I had an infantry drill instructor, so he was particularly hard on us. This was also right after 9/11, so everybody coming out of there, especially if you chose an infantry job, which I did, would be almost certainly you're going to go to war. So they trained you hard for it. You know, boot camp has had various standards over the years. I've seen some Marines in a peacetime environment come out of boot camp and the training got lax. But when we were in boot camp with an infantry with the wartime environment, it was hard and it was scary. But after that is when I realized the power of that, because by pushing through fear, I was able to find something in my own spirit to transcend that fear. I was discovering how strong I was. You know, all the virtues that we value, to embody those virtues, to ingrain the virtues, you're going to have to go through the barrier to those virtues. That's kind of the paradox. There's a price to every virtue. If you want courage, you're going to have to experience fear. If you want power, you're going to have to feel pain. If you want strength, you're going to have to struggle. So I recognized that. The Marines taught me that. So I started going into places of pain, of struggle, of fear, to build the virtues that I would find on the other side of them.
That I realize that as an adult, like the virtues that I want to have, I have to earn them. And for that reason, my wife hates when I pray for patience. She's like, no, like we're about to have to earn that patience.
Yeah.
Like, don't do that. She would laugh about it because it's like inevitably if I'm like, okay, you know, God, give Megan and I patience, you know, give us the opportunities to grow in patience. It's like she always gets the brunt of it.
Can't we pray for just to be grateful? How about that? Because it's a message.
That's what she would say. Like the last time I did that, it was like we were eating tacos, and sure enough, it's like, okay, I'm in. And she takes first bite of a taco. The tortilla rips, and it's like falls all over. She was like, "If you ever pray for patience." But that's very true, an astute observation that you have to experience the hardship to earn that courage, or to earn that bravery, to earn the patience, to build it up within you. Otherwise it's just theoretical.
Completely. You have to earn it in the arena.
Yeah, I was listening to something that Jordan Peterson had put out a while back, and he was talking about the Israelites in the desert and the snakes biting them, and they were, asking for Moses to pray to take the snakes away. And God told Moses to put a snake on a staff, and he held it up to him. And his insight there was that while they were afraid of the snakes, God could have very well just removed the snakes, but he made them face the fear. To get over that challenge, and even just kind of hold it up high and look at it. Did you find that you had difficulty in some of these things embracing that fear? Because the fear shouldn't go away. There's a reason we're fearful. It keeps us safe, keeps us alive from doing stupid things.
Yeah.
Right. What's the biggest challenge you had in that?
When I first started, it was very, very hard. I was terrified. But when I first got into the Marines, when I first started getting in outdoor sports, after enlisting in the Marines, all those things were very hard because they were so new. And I hadn't developed the relationship with fear that today, for example, that I have. I mean, even writing a book on fear was terrifying. Any new thing I do was scary. But one of my core mantras is when you engage it, fear propels you to prepare. Fear propels you to prepare. So, for example, writing a book, I was scared that what if people think it's terrible? What if people think I'm stupid? What if people judge me? So on and so forth. So I was like, all right, I'm scared of writing a terrible book. So I'm going to study how to write a good book. So I studied. I learned how to become a better writer. I learned from authors like Tim Ferriss, Jack Canfield. How do you write a better book? And as a result, I wrote a book that I'm now proud of. It was endorsed by the Dalai Lama, among many other great people, and it's now making an impact. But it was my fear of writing a bad book that led me to writing a good book, even going to Antarctica. I was terrified. I should be scared. It'd be stupid if I wasn't scared, to your point.
Right.
So I studied, I learned, I prepared like an animal. I prepared so intensely. So I had developed a relationship now to this point where, yeah, I'm still scared. Now I'm back from Antarctica and I'm working hard on my business, and there's fear when you launch something and it doesn't go the way you want it to. There's fear. What if it doesn't do well? But good. Now there's a lesson in that. That teaches me to prepare. That teaches me to assess, to study, to figure out what's wrong so I can find the problem, fix the problem, and keep moving forward.
How do you get an endorsement from the Dalai Lama? I'm not seeing him endorse a lot of books.
Not so much. I was very blessed. That was a real honor. It was honestly a cold pitch. It was a cold pitch. So this is I think a good lesson here is, when I wrote Fearvana, it's a very spiritual idea, a very spiritual concept, this notion that fear is not the antithesis of nirvana. Fear can be an access point to nirvana. And it's this thing we all struggle with: fear, stress, anxiety, some flavor of it. So and I had no brand, no platform at all at this point. So I wanted someone who was a leader in the spiritual world to endorse this concept. So I thought to myself, why not the Dalai Lama? Initially, I was like, there's no way. There's no way. Who am I? All those thoughts that we can all relate to. But I thought, what's the worst if at least to trying? If I try and he says, no, I'm exactly where I am right now. So what's the worst?
Yeah.
So I reached out to His Holiness's office, the form on his website, got me nowhere, did a ton of research, found an actual human being, a name in His Holiness's office, and reached out to this particular monk in the monastery. He connected me to 3 other monks, finally got to the right one. I shot a personal video sharing who I am, what I've been through, the struggles that led me to Fearvana. After the war, I had struggled with PTSD, depression, addiction, and how I rose from that, and the mission we want to do with Fearvana to help others. And over 5-6 months of building a relationship with the monk there, and throughout that time, I constantly had doubt. Why would they endorse this book? What if they're not replying because they think it's garbage? So on and so forth. But the thing is, you can have a thought, but you don't have to be defined by that thought. You can act in the face of those thoughts. And so I kept following up. And after 5-6 months, this monk wrote me saying, considering everything you've been through and your genuine desire to serve, I'll press your case. And eventually, I'd only asked for a 1-line endorsement, but I was truly humbled and honored that the Dalai Lama wrote the foreword for the book. And to this day, we have the Dalai Lama's seal and a signature and a letter that we framed up in our house. So it was a huge honor, and very, very, very grateful for that.
Yeah, that's really special. You embraced the fear and just kept going, but what you said, that really stuck with me. I can have the thought, but not be defined by the thought. I really like that a lot. A lot of my clients will have fears, maybe I'm afraid of running out of money, let's say. And I can sit there and show them the math, like, hey, you spending at this rate, like you're not going to run out of money. You know, even if 2007 Great Recession repeats itself tomorrow, you're still going to be okay. But what I don't tell them is, oh, get rid of that fear. Like,
I love
some of that's a little bit healthy.
Yeah.
Or don't be afraid. Or
I go, hey, that's normal. That's acceptable. Some of that's good because some of that fear got you to where you are now. And I can see a lot of times they're like, wait a second, you know, because they thought either I'm going to say, yeah, you should be afraid, or don't be afraid. And it's this in between that they're like, wait, so keep being afraid, but don't be obsessed by it. And what you said is a really great way of capturing that.
Thank you. And I love that you do that with your clients. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see parents make, is they'll tell kids, don't, and again, it's coming from a place of love, so it's not intentional but it's so damaging when you do this. Don't be scared. Don't worry. Don't stress out. Don't feel fear. And all you're saying is don't feel what you're feeling. And if you deny or resist the emotion that you're experiencing, it's not going to go away. It's only going to make it worse. It's going to run your life anyway. But if you allow yourself to experience it fully, that's how you move through it, because the only way out is through. The only way out of anything is through.
You said something a minute ago. You said, and I may not be quoting you right, but you said fear is a gateway to nirvana. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I said fear is not the antithesis of nirvana. Fear is an access point to it. And that's really the ethos and the essence of my book, Fearvana, the work Fearvana, is that this idea of fear and its cousins, if you will, stress, anxiety, these things that are very normal parts of the human experience, are often demonized. And universally, I do talks around the world, and I'll sometimes, very often in my talks, I'll ask people, when I show you words like fear, stress, anxiety, pain, suffering, adversity, how many of you think of it as something positive? Almost nobody raises their hands. Universally, we've developed a paradigm and a relationship that these forces are negative. And that's the fundamental problem in the human experience. And the greatest cause for our mental health struggles is the demonization of these very normal experiences. And so I wrote this book to combat that, to help people fall in love with fear, fall in love with stress, fall in love with anxiety, embrace them as access points, because you're going to experience them one way or another. Whether you seek it out or not, you don't have to go to the edge of Antarctica to experience it. You can do anything, and anything worthwhile. You both know, you've built a business. Anything worthwhile is hard. You're going to go through moments of hardship, of tremendous struggle. And if you demonize these forces, if you resist them, if you fight them, they will run your life. But when you embrace them and you accept them as normal, you can now be with them. You can choose to harness them. You can use them as access points to the success you want to create on a very tactical, tangible, practical level, as in money, relationships, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But also on an internal level of spiritual peace, fulfillment, whatever you want to call it, and joy. But the more you resist these forces we deem as so-called negative, the more they will run your life. So the reality is that there are no bad emotions. There's no good emotions. There's only emotions, and it's up to us to decide what we do with them. Any emotion, if we consciously channel, can be used as something beautiful. Even, for example, when I came back from the war, I struggled with survivor's guilt. When I was in the war, I lost a very close friend of mine. When I was out there, my vehicle drove over an active bomb that for some reason did not explode. I had a friend whose vehicle who drove over a bomb, it exploded, he died. And I struggled a lot with survivor's guilt. And everybody said, don't feel guilty, it's not your fault. And rationally, conceptually, I get it. War, you can't control what things happen. Bullets fly where they fly, bombs explode where they explode. But emotionally, it didn't change the fact that I still had guilt. Until I learned that this guilt is not quote unquote bad. It just is. If anything, my guilt is an expression of my love for my brother. So for a long time, what I did was I put a picture of my friend up on my wall, and it said, this should have been you. Earn this life. And my guilt became fuel to sober up, to write my book, Fearvana, to share the lessons I've learned, and to do the work that I now do to help others navigate suffering.
Yeah, that's a great point, because the way that you react to that guilt could be good or bad, but the guilt itself is not necessarily good or bad. If you decide, oh, well, I'm guilty, I feel guilty, I feel like I have this life that I don't deserve, and so I'm going to reject anything positive, well, then you're going to go a very common path, addiction, or you're going to blow all the money that you have. You're going to ruin relationships. You're going to make your life as worthless as possible because you've convinced yourself that it's worth nothing. If, on the other hand, you say, I have something I don't deserve, wow, how amazing that is. well, then you're going to make your life and do what you did as good as it possibly could be, because it's something that you don't deserve. So even looking at it as I don't deserve this thing isn't a bad perspective. It's how you react.
What you
And
do
I
with that.
see, I think maybe Sean would agree, but people people make major financial mistakes out of emotions that we would tend to view as positive. Like they're very excited and optimistic. They have an opportunity that they're over the moon for.
Yeah.
People lose a lot more money with that than they do out of fear. I mean, you can still lose money out of fear. You can still mess things up out of fear, but you could also be fearful and protect what you have, or be fearful and make very smart choices, be fearful and not spend too much. But I'll see a lot of people get excited and they're less attuned to the risks because they perceive it as, a positive emotion.
That's a really good point.
Fear of missing out.
Their antenna's not up. When they're afraid, a lot of the times, even if they are acting out of that fear and letting that fear guide them, they will be aware that it's that there's a risk in doing that, But when they're excited and making money decisions out of excitement, they're very rarely aware that there's even the possibility that they're guided down the wrong path based on their emotions.
That's a really great point.
So was there what was the moment that pulled you out of that, or made you have that mindset shift after the war?
After the war, I struggled a lot. I got to a point, you mentioned addiction. I was drinking an absurd amount of alcohol. I mean, literally drinking a full bottle of vodka a day. This would go on for days on end, binge drinking. And one morning I woke up and I was seconds away from slitting my own wrists. And that was the moment that began the climb out of this abyss, because it just shocked me that I had gotten to a point that I would even consider taking my own life. That didn't happen overnight, but it was a dark descent that led to that. But the fact that I finally got to a point that I could actually consider even taking my own life and seriously consider it, that was the shock that I needed to get me out of that stupor and start climbing back out. Now, it wasn't a smooth ride by any means. I broke my sobriety a ton, but I started researching neuroscience, psychology, spirituality, doing the inner work, confronting my own demons, being still with myself. One of the things that was what drove me into the darkness the first time, the literal darkness where I spent 7 days in a darkness retreat, sitting still with myself, so dark you can't see your hand in front of you. Because if you don't confront the demons within, they will run your life without your awareness. Carl Jung put it perfectly when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And this is why you will see people who seemingly have everything, have money, have success. We see this with celebrities all the time, and yet they're struggling, yet they're in their own internal hell. So external success, I'm not demonizing that. That's something we all want. I want it too, but it's not going to be the path to fulfillment and peace if you don't confront those demons within and bring them to the surface. Otherwise, they're running your life and you're going to call it fate. So I had to do that. And that was...
Was the darkness retreat the first big step that you made toward active change?
So I had actually sobered up before that. I had done a lot of the inner work, but I went through this very, very challenging divorce many, many years ago now. And when that happened, I broke my sobriety. So that was when I got back. That was what drove me to the darkness, because I realized that I had done a lot of hard things at this point. I had built a business, wrote a book, run ultra marathons, done these insane expeditions, been in the Marines, done a lot of physically and mentally hard things. But the thing that still scared me was stillness. And this I have come to learn through all my coaching and speaking is it seems to be the number one fear in the human condition. And people won't admit it or acknowledge it as a fear. Like if you ask them, what are you scared of? Almost nobody will say stillness. But if you look at the world around you, it could not be more evident. People will do everything they can possibly do to distract themselves from themselves. They will do everything to avoid facing their own soul. And sometimes that thing that they do can even be positive. Working out. When I went to Greenland in 2012, I dragged a 190-pound sled for 350 miles across the ice cap in Greenland. A very positive thing. I was invited to speak on stages about it. But at the time, I was doing it only to run away from my own demons. When I hit the rock bottom moment, it was actually after that expedition. So today I still do these expeditions, but I'm doing it from a different level of consciousness. I'm not doing it as an escape. I'm doing it as a search, as a curiosity, as a seeking for enlightenment, for awakening, for those greater depths into the human soul. But there was a time when I did everything I could to run away. And that's why I went into the darkness, to be still.
What do you think people are fearing when they're not wanting to be in stillness?
Great question. I think that we are scared of the chaos of what happens in our mind. It's a scary place. And the thing with stillness is, this is what, with meditation, people will often frame it as this beautiful, peaceful thing. But here's the thing. When you sit still with yourself, you're going to open doors within your own soul. And what comes out of those doors is not just sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. It's also your demons. It's also the darkness. And I think that's what scares people, is facing that darkness. The greatest hero's journey that every one of us can take is the journey within. It's a beautiful thing to get all that external success, the money, the house, relationship, all those good things. We all want that too. I think it's a beautiful thing to get that. But the toughest hero's journey is the one that we go within. And you're going to face the biggest dragons you've ever faced when you go within. And I think that's and it's understandably scary. It is scary. I was scared going into the dark. It was absurdly uncomfortable. The first time I went in the darkness, the first 2 days, I was just working out a ton because I had developed such a comfort zone with working out. So I realized after day 2 in the darkness that you're doing this to escape the stillness. So I made a hard rule that for the next 5 days, there will be no working out allowed. You cannot escape the silence. And I was, even in the darkness, I was trying to escape the silence by doing something that was within my paradigm of comfort, within my world of comfort. So I think that's what's so scary.
What's an example of the type of negative, I hate to even like couch it in a judgment, but I can understand how people are unconsciously afraid of this. Like your point, most people won't say, I'm afraid of being silent, but you observe their life and they're constantly being stimulated. They're constantly doing something. Even if they're relaxing, they're watching Netflix or they're on their phone or they're listening to music, there's something's coming in.
Yeah.
So unconsciously, I can see how we're all afraid. But what is it that we're afraid of? Like, what's going to happen to me in the silence?
That's the thing. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? But fears, as we know, are not always based on a hardcore truth. When you truly assess the fear, you realize that, like, if I write a bad book, what's the worst that can happen? I'm not going to die. I'll be fine. I'll get a few people who write negative reviews. I'll be fine. So in that sense, nothing dramatic is going to happen, but that doesn't mean it's still not scary.
Were there uncomfortable things that you learned about yourself during that darkness retreat that you started to see, you started to acknowledge, you started to think deeper about, and you didn't like it, but you recognized it was a good thing to be aware of?
I had gone, when I did the darkness retreat the first time, now, as I mentioned, I had sobered up at this point, but I went a lot deeper into confronting my own relationship with guilt, with the war, with not just the war, but my whole experience in life. And I've been born to good parents. My parents love me. But I've seen the hell on earth from being in war. I've worked with survivors of sex trafficking, with former child soldiers, with people in poverty, people in the darkest corners of hell, that simply by being born where they were cursed with opportunities that I was blessed with simply by being born where I was born. So just confronting a lot of those experiences that I've had and recognizing that, I think the biggest thing the darkness retreat opened up for me was there's certain questions you'll never be able to answer. So if I ask this question, why did I live when my friend died? There is no answer. You can sometimes people would say things to me that I didn't really like or didn't resonate with me, like, oh, God had a purpose for you. But then what does that mean about my friend, right? Screw him,
Yeah.
So what I realized was there'll never be an answer. And instead of asking that question, the question asked is, I'm here. What can I do with it now? How can I be worthy of this life? How can I be worthy of my suffering? So it altered my reality and how the questions I ask, and embracing the mysticism of the universe, that there is no answers to many questions, but that's okay. I can still be with what is and move forward.
It's a lot more freeing to accept the answers that we can't know.
I completely agree.
Yeah. There's I think it's a foolish errand to try to make sense of everything, but at the same time, it's a way to honor God to try to make sense of things. We've just got to find the things that are worth trying to make sense of. Like, it's good to study our solar system. That's cool. There's some parts of it that we'll never understand. That's fine. We're going to keep trying though. But the question of, why did this thing happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? You're not going to get an answer to that. That's a really good point that you made. I like that a lot.
Thank you. That book actually I don't know if you've read that book, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People by Harold Kushner. That book laid the foundation for my relationship with God. It's a really powerful one that I highly recommend if you haven't read it.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So the darkness retreat, I understand what, like, a little bit about what went on in your mind and your heart and your spirit. What is it like every day? Like, how do you eat? How do you take a crap?
All in the dark. But I chose to do a juice fast the entire time because I wanted to add in the element of hunger into the experience. So the first time it was
just why not?
Yeah, why not? Exactly. What else am I going to do? So I had 2 juices a day. The second time I went in the darkness, what they would do is they had a kind of a box. They would put the juice in from outside, close the box, and then you open it. And so then you bring the juice in. Because the key is you don't want even a single bit of exposure to light. Because what happens is when you're in that level of darkness for an extended period of time, you start hallucinating, essentially. You start seeing lights that are as real as any other light. And I mean, the brightest light I've ever seen in my entire life was sitting in a dark room. It was so bright that it was blinding me. I literally was shielding my eyes because it was blinding me and it was sitting in a pitch dark room. So it was a very surreal experience, but I would just do 2 juice fasts and you just, the experience in there is if you're not sleeping, I was journaling in the dark as well. So I would have like a ruler and kind of move it down through a journal. So I journaled in the dark, a lot of meditations. And then between all of that, you're just sitting there being like, damn, I have a lot of time left sitting in here. So you have to confront that boredom, and you just sit with yourself.
And you have no idea what time it is.
Exactly. No idea what time. You have no sense of time.
So hold on, but like you're in there, you don't know what day it is.
Yeah. Your only measure of time is the 2 juices that you get a day. But even then they won't do it at the exact same time. They'll do it, but you'll know, okay, 2 juices equals a day, essentially. But on the last 2 days, when I did the 10-day darkness retreat, I chose to do juices for the first 8 days, and then the last 2 I had nothing because you can leave a little note. So I would write a little note saying, don't give me juices anymore. And then for the last 2 days, I did a pure water fast, and I had no sense of time for that. So not even the juices to give you a frame of reference.
What about like the toilet in the bed? There's a toilet in there?
Toilet. It's a very small room, bed, toilet. Yeah. And you just walk over. You get a sense.
And you just got to like find it with your hands.
Yeah. So you kind of feel, you do step into the room before you go into darkness. So you have a sense of it visually. But once you're in the dark, obviously you can't see. And so you just kind of feel your way around. But it's pretty wild how quickly you develop comfort with that.
Was utter silence as well?
It is not soundproof. Both the darkness retreats I did, the room wasn't soundproof. So in the first one I did, you could hear the birds chirping out. Even the second one, it was a little bit more soundproof. So I didn't hear too much, but every once in a while you'd hear like a bird chirping or something like that.
Does anybody ever come out of this regretting it?
Hard to say. I would imagine not. Maybe there's some, but it is a profoundly beautiful experience. Like I couldn't recommend it enough for anyone. One of my friends asked me, okay, what if I haven't been through crazy trauma? Would it still be helpful to me? And I think yes. You don't have to have gone through the depths of trauma to find value in there. It'll still open up. This is one thing that high-level business owners and driven people, I think they struggle with, is that stillness is somehow slowing down. But stillness is not the same as doing nothing. Those are 2 very, very different things. Doing nothing is subconscious, automatic, call it laziness. Stillness is a very conscious decision to slow down in order to speed up, because it'll allow you to access parts of yourself that'll build you better mental weapons to move forward on your craft with greater power and strength.
Did you find that the experience, more than just the personal growth, was it therapeutic in terms of fighting some of these issues around PTSD or alcohol, and was that the purpose of it in any way?
The first time it was, and it was very therapeutic. The second time I wasn't going into the darkness as a way to heal the past. It was more training for the future, because I was going into Antarctica, which I just recently returned from, where I spent 60 days completely alone in Antarctica. So the second time I went in as training for that, to master being with my mind. But it was very therapeutic the first time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, if that were training for that, because that's just solitude. You're going across Antarctica. So tell me that story.
Being alone sounds...
Yeah.
That's as much of a fear as the stillness for a lot of people.
Solitude can be very terrifying. And it was for me. When I was drinking, I could be in a room with 100 people drinking and not even feel a 1% desire to drink. But when I would go into the night alone, that's when my triggers would rise and I would start downing because I couldn't handle being alone with my thoughts. And so it was the solitude, but needless to say, I've gotten pretty good with that now. I just returned from spending 60 days completely alone in Antarctica, dragging a 420-pound sled from the coast of Antarctica for 500 miles in what was the first time a human being had ever attempted the expedition I attempted. The goal was to ski across the entire continent. It had not only never been done before, it had never even been attempted before to do a full coast-to-coast crossing without dogs or kites. And it's borderline impossible, arguably impossible. Everybody told me anyone who attempts this will probably fail, that we don't believe it can be done. I heard that a ton from people, but I raised $1.1 million from scratch to fund the expedition, went out there, pushed my body literally to the brink of death. I ended up getting diverticulitis, which, if left untreated, essentially it's infection in the colon. If left untreated, it can burst, get septic in your blood, and kill you. And 8 years ago, an adventurer did die from that's exactly what happened to him. So pushed my body to the brink of death, but it was an expedition that I believe to be impossible, at least starting from that side of Antarctica. But I think it's worth trying the impossible, and I think this universally applies to business owners as well. Aim for the stars, aim for the outer reaches of the universe, and it's a hell of a fight. You may fail dramatically. You, in my case, literally pushed the body to the brink of death, but I have zero regrets. It was a battle worth pursuing.
What made you think it was possible?
I knew that it was on the very cusp of like the edge of possible. I thought, you have to, with Antarctica, a lot of it is luck, because you could get terrible conditions and you're screwed. And that's what happened with the time, the year I went, which was just last year. We got some of the worst snow conditions in modern history from in every expedition season. There were 3 other adventurers attempting shorter records out there, different kinds of records. All of us failed because we got hit with an unbelievable amount of soft snow. And even normal other adventures that normally take 30 days were taking 40 days. So it was, and when you're dragging 420-pound sled through soft snow, just to give you an example, there was one day, or actually a few days, where it was 2 sleds. Every 3 steps, they would get stuck in the soft snow. I would have to wrestle them out. They would get stuck again. And this would go on for 9 to 10 hours a day. It was hellish. It was unforgiving. And you'd have to keep moving through that day after day after day. So the soft snow is a big reason the expedition was killed. But even if I didn't get it, it's hard to say if it was possible, because I had to cover, the goal was 1,750 miles while pulling a 420-pound sled with all your food and supplies to survive for over 110 days in Antarctica. 115 days, sorry. 115 days was the initial mission.
What is the terrain like when you're going across? I mean, obviously there's snow, but is it mountainous or?
It is.
Yeah.
The side that I started on, you're climbing uphill from day one, which is another reason why it was so brutal. If you start from the other side of Antarctica, there would have been 30 days of flat terrain. So I believe that there's a very small likelihood of possibility if you start from the other side, but I didn't have a choice. Getting to the other side is very, very hard to do. And so we didn't have a good weather window, so I had to choose the side that I started on. It was not a choice, but when you start on that side, you're going uphill from day one, because the South Pole is actually at 9,500 feet. So you are climbing uphill with a 420-pound sled in the soft snow, and then after the halfway mark, which was the geographic South Pole, I would then start descending, but I didn't end up getting to the geographic South Pole. What I did complete was the steepest portion of the journey, the hardest climbs. But by the end of it, the body broke. That's when I got the diverticulitis. I had spine pain, chest pain, gut pain, dizziness, couldn't hold my breath, falling over because I felt like I was drunk out there. It was unforgiving.
So I would think when you're preparing for something like that, and you're the first person who's done it, you've got to figure out what you need.
Yeah.
You can't just Google, what's the packing list for my, solo trip across Antarctica? Did you find that you brought stuff you didn't need?
No, I was because this obviously wasn't my first expedition. You have to have done a lot to even have a resume enough to get the permit to attempt something like this. And I was so weight conscious to cut weight on my sled. I was literally cutting tags off the shirt. I had one base layer the entire time. I only had to one spare underwear, but everything else, we were cutting the when we tied the food bag, we would cut above the knot to save, if I can save a gram. I cut my toothbrush in half to save another couple of grams there. Every little thing I could do to save weight, we were doing, because it was built on a lot of experience.
Who's given a permit?
There's a company called ALE, Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions. They're the ones that manage all expeditions for adventurers in Antarctica. So
I
they
didn't
go
even know
through
that was a
the
thing.
they go through the logistics and the process of getting
Yeah,
permits.
because it's not like it's a state park.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why, I mean, logistically, it was quite a challenge because they had never actually put together a logistical plan for an expedition like this. Hence the $1.1 million price tag.
But who's going to stop you?
Well, theoretically, I mean, Antarctica, you could
you
go
just go show up
on
no
your own.
permit.
But I guess they won't help you if.
Oh, I see. They're not going to help
Not to mention, you
Got
can't
it.
just sort of fly there, right? Like you could theoretically take a boat there, but Antarctica is not an easy place to get to. You have to go through the Drake Passage, the stormiest seas in the world. I mean, theoretically, if you find a way to just land up on the coast of Antarctica on your own, go for it. But it's not an easy place to get to.
So are they able to rescue you if you are tapping out halfway through?
Yeah, so that's what happened on day 60 when the gut pain was quite severe, to put it mildly. That's when we called it and they came and got me. There's a main base camp in Antarctica called Union Glacier. So they flew a Twin Otter plane from Union Glacier to pick me up. We went back to Union Glacier, and then from there I flew to Chile.
What did you learn about yourself doing that?
The biggest thing I learned was that the body will, when you train your mind enough, the body will break before the mind does. I mean, my body literally broke before the mind does. And that's one thing there was many moments that I could have quit. I was, on about day 40 or day 45, we knew that the crossing was no longer possible. There was just, the math wasn't feasible anymore. There was no way I would have got to the other end of Antarctica on day 115. By day 45, that was very evident. But I still stayed. I still kept fighting. And the body broke before the mind did. So when you push to that level, I mean, the only way to actually discover what the limits are is to explore those limits. And so that was a beautiful thing, to find out how far you can go when you push. Now coming back, building a business, it changes the paradigm. It gives you perspective. Right now, yeah, building a business is hard. You both know that. But at least when I'm sitting here on my computer, I'm like, I'm not dragging a 420-pound sled through snow. I'll be fine, So I'm not going to die doing this. So it built a lot of perspective that's only further reinforced about the truly limitless capacity of the human spirit to endure struggle. And that's really the core essence of everything I do now. Everything I teach, the resources on my site that I help others, is how to push through struggle to get the results you want.
So the sled, when you're going up, I'm assuming there's like a brake that prevents it from just sliding
all the way back down.
There is not.
What?
It's so you're skiing when you're skiing up, you're using cross-country skis. There's what I put as full skins, what's called full skin. So essentially they create grip on the skis. But if I unclip the sled from my harness, it would slide back down.
So you're telling me your skis are holding the entire weight of this sled. And how heavy was the sled again?
Starting weight, the starting weight was 420 pounds.
400. So you're telling me there's not a time where you like shift your weight a little bit and then it starts pulling you back?
Well, it's clipped onto you. So when it's a steeper climb, you have to just that's why it's so hard, is all the weight's on you.
Yeah.
So you feel everything starts hurting from pretty early on.
What about when you're going down? Like, let's say you're going down and you want to stop.
There would never be, there was never, well, actually, not never. There was one day where I had some downhills, but the downhills are not that steep. It's not like you're kind of, skiing, like conventional alpine skiing
You're
down
not
the slopes
bombing it down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, you're never going to deal with that steep descents that you have to worry about that. There was one day there was some descending, and I would just have to kind of control the sled behind me.
I guess you're not going to hit a tree either.
No, there's nothing out there. It's blank white nothingness for most of the expedition. That's one of the mental challenges, is there's no stimuli to engage your mind. So you just have to be with what is. So Antarctica is not, polar expeditions are not as dangerous as climbing big mountains, but they're far more mental and physical suffering. Now, there is some danger. Like, I lost 2 fingers to frostbite 4 years ago in Antarctica. This was on my first Antarctic expedition. I got frostbite and lost the tips of 2 fingers to that. So, it's obviously a hostile, unforgiving place. But the biggest challenge is the mental challenge of just doing the same thing over and over and over again in the monotony of nothingness.
Was there any like grief for your lost fingers?
No, not at all, actually. It was when you choose to view life as an adventure, everything becomes a part of that adventure. And this
Were
is
you
kind
like
of the
kind of like proud of it?
Yeah, 100%. Like I didn't, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't choose to get Frostbite, but when it happened, I was like, this is badass. This is a really cool story because
Yeah,
it was,
dude, that's
again,
psycho.
I didn't want to go through it. I went through 7 months of black fingers, pain when I had this finger surgically removed. It hurt like hell. And this finger actually, it recovered fully. So my left finger, middle finger, it recovered fully. It was a normal looking finger again. But once you get frostbite for the rest of your life, you're going to be more prone to frostbite. So when I went on cold weather expeditions in the Arctic, this left middle finger, the tip of it would get cold faster than the rest of my fingers. So I had it preemptively surgically removed. And the doctors wouldn't cut it off. I mean, I had to go to 3 doctors. No doctor here would do it. I went back to my where I'm originally from, where my parents live in India, and I had to convince. I went to 3 doctors. Finally, I had to convince the doctor, and the doctor was like, "This is a good finger. We can't cut it off." And I said, "Look, I'm going back into the cold one way or another." So, because the doctor was like, "We recommend you stop doing Arctic expeditions, Antarctic expeditions." I said, "That's not a choice. So that's not going to happen. So I'm going to need you to cut it off." And the thing that actually finally convinced the doctor to do it, my mom's support. My mom's told the doctor, "No, I need you to do this for my son." And the doctor was like, "What kind of mom would tell, say cut off my son's finger unless there's a very compelling reason?" But the lesson was, look, like I said, there's a price to pay for anything. To me, cutting off the tip of my finger was a very small price to pay for the unbelievable rewards of going back into these expeditions that I love and to explore the edges. So I didn't care. Now it hurt like hell. Obviously there was anesthesia, but after it went away, it hurt. It suffered lots of pain, but more than worth it. More than worth it.
It's so funny when doctors advise. You go to a doctor, you go, "Okay, hey, I need your help so I can continue to do this thing that I love." And their advice is, "Well, stop doing that.
Stop doing that thing."
Yeah.
But that wasn't even an option for me. So, I mean, my friends here, who a lot of my military buddies, they were kind of joking. They were like, "Dude, if the doctor doesn't cut it off, we'll just cut it off for you." And they were happy to do it. And I was like, "Thanks, guys, but I'm good."
That's wild, man.
So what was the circumstance that you got frostbite the first time?
I was on day 17 of my Antarctic expedition. And funny thing is, I wasn't walking around with no gloves. I had my gloves on, my mittens on, wasn't doing anything crazy. I had been in the cold many times before that, but it kind of came out of nowhere. That was the weird part about it. I do have a blood disorder that transports about 25% less oxygen through my bloodstream than what is normal. Even 2 doctors told me that would kill me in Marine Corps boot camp. So even going into the Marines, I had to fight my way in. I had to get waivers, and it took me a year and a half to enlist in the Marines just to get the clearance to go in. But that was partly the cause, because the extremities, not enough oxygen flowing through the blood. But partly I also learned later that I was wearing gloves more often than I should have. And I should have been wearing mittens more often, because gloves separate each finger. And so although I had gloves on, so when I went to Antarctica the second time, I actually had what's called a lobster gloves. So they would be like this, and they were big enough that when I was skiing, I would just move my finger and make it like a mitten. So all the fingers, the body heat stays next to each other, and that keeps the fingers slightly warmer. So that was a little bit of a mistake turns out I made, but it also came out of nowhere, which was surprising, because it's not like I felt cold the day before it happened. It suddenly hit on the 7th hour of the 17th day.
Jeez. What about like your face? How do you save your nose?
You're wearing a face mask. So especially if it's even slightly windy, you're covered head to toe. Not a single bit of your skin is exposed.
You see like an astronaut.
Yeah, you really are. You have a parka. It's very wild looking. You have a parka with fur. You look like this crazy.
And you're not changing clothes.
No.
Yeah, you're wearing the same thing for the whole time.
Yeah, needless to say, you get a little funky.
Do you just smell yourself?
You don't notice it anymore.
That would actually cause me to quit. That would be what would cause me to quit.
You don't even notice it anymore yourself, because you're so used to it. But when I came back, I had a brief shower at Union Glacier, changed. At Union Glacier, the main base camp, I had new clothes. But even when I came back, I met my wife in Chile, and she was like, "Dude, you still smell a little funky, even though you had a small shower and you changed. It's not gone yet." So,
it's going to take weeks.
Exactly.
How cold was it inside the tent?
Funnily enough, in Antarctica, it was too hot, because it's 24 hours daylight. So the way the sun hits the tent, you actually get too hot in the tent. This isn't the case when I've done expeditions in the Arctic. When it gets dark inside the tent, I've been sometimes where it's minus 35, minus 40, and it's pretty cold. But in Antarctica, because of the way the sun hits the tent, more often than not, I would say 90% of the time, I was hot. I would actually be sitting there in my boxers. I would have to open the tent door just to get cool air in because it was too hot.
Oh, that's not what I expected.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing to think about because it's Antarctica, but inside the tent, you're more often than not, it's too hot.
Wow. So you didn't have any wildlife to contend with in Antarctica. You said you did some Arctic expeditions. I saw that you'd done some training in Svalbard. I'd been up there a while back, and the thing that I remember is we were walking around and we get to this sign that says don't go past here because there's polar bears.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, I guess we'll not go past this sign. Did you have any rough encounters when you were training up in Svalbard? Or
on expedition, we didn't run into polar bears, thankfully. But after the expedition, we went out on snowmobiles and we did see one in the distance. That was really cool. They're magnificent creatures. I mean, they'll destroy you if you come close to them, but they're really beautiful from afar.
Yeah, I'd want to be on a
snowmobile
sure.
Was a little more comforting. Exactly.
Helicopter.
Exactly. That's cool that you've been to Svalbard. It's a stunning place.
Yeah.
Is there anything I know you're not trying to avoid fear, right? You embrace the fear.
Yeah.
But I would imagine in embracing the fear, your reaction to that fear or initial fear, it kind of lessens over time, right? You continue to embrace the silence. Well, it's not as scary anymore, but it's still kind of there a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What's something that you are still the most afraid of?
I'd say the biggest one is a fear of failure in anything I do. And that's a good fear, I think. It drives you. I was scared of failing in Antarctica. I'm now scared of failing in my business. Now, when running a business, I'm not scared of dying or anything like that. You're going to be fine. But fear of failure is a big driver.
I think that's one for a lot of people. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of loss of reputation. Those types of things in business. We face those. How do you determine if facing some fear that it's a worthy endeavor to face this fear versus the sort of natural, hey, this is a fear I ought to pay attention to and avoid?
Great question. It's as simple, but this as simple is not easy as just a conscious degree of awareness. If I'm standing the edge of a cliff and I'm looking down and I feel fear, which I do when I stand on the top of a building, that's a reasonable fear to be like, don't jump off that building or whatever it may be, right? I know that's a little bit of an extreme example, but the point is that's a reasonable fear. So it's simply with conscious awareness. Like one of the things I will do with clients I work with, and even for myself, is at any crossroads in life, there's going to be a struggle on either path. And inevitably, there'll be a fear on either path at any crossroads. So the question to ask is not which passion do I want to follow, but which struggle am I willing to endure? So what I will write, I'll do this and I'll have people do this, is write down path A, path B, rewards and struggles on each path. And because you're not going to rise to the level of the desires you want, you're going to fall to the level of the suffering that you're willing to endure. And so you got to ask yourself, is this a struggle I'm willing to endure? And that's a really good measure to see, is this fear worth pursuing? But ultimately, like when the fear of inaction outweighs the fear of action, you will move forward on your path. Because there's also a good fear to actually tap into is the fear of looking back on your life, imagining yourself on your deathbed many years from now and thinking, how do I feel about my life? That was what helped me write my book. When I used to procrastinate on writing the book, and I did, I would imagine myself dying, literally imagining myself, visualizing, meditating on this. And this is a practice in many spiritual cultures, is meditating on death. Meditate on your death and imagine yourself dying, never having shared your message with the world. That's a scary thought. So the fear of inaction was outweighed by the fear of action. And then you move forward on your path.
Yeah, most people don't spend enough time honestly assessing what that inaction could lead to.
Exactly. But that's why meditating on death and being present to your own mortality is one of the most powerful weapons to drive you forward on a more fulfilling life.
Yeah. A lot of times when my clients are dealing with decisions that are difficult for them, and they're not always like major life-changing decisions. It may just be they don't know immediately whether to do this or to not do it. They'll say, "Hey, I'm happy whether you do it or not. What I can't stand is you just not deciding. That's not a real outcome. That's not you're not picking. If you're going to pick doing nothing and you're doing that with full awareness of the risks and the consequences and the potential downsides, I endorse it. If you're going to move forward, I'm going to be here to support you. But if you just keep procrastinating this every 2 months, when we meet, eventually we're not going to be able to do that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Patton who said a good decision today is better than a great decision tomorrow.
Yeah.
What do you think's the next fear you're going to face?
Currently, right now, we're working on the brand, the business. The last 4 years, I was dedicating my entire world to getting ready for Antarctica. So now I'm working together with my wife, building up Fearvana, building up the resources, the training to help other people, doing a lot more speaking. And that's the fear, is the fear of failure around that, fear of not hitting the targets that I set. Eventually, that's one thing that scares me, terrifies me, is kids. So that's in the cards in the future between my wife and I. So right now it's the business, then kids, and who knows if I am someone who loves outdoor adventure. So if where that'll take me next, I'm not entirely sure. But for right now, focusing on the brand.
Yeah. And well, final question: what do you think is your biggest decision-making tip for business owners?
Great question. I would say think of it from a first principles thinking model. So whatever the issue, break it down into the core concrete concepts without the opinions and the paradigms that shape that. And then do what I said earlier, right? Outline and okay, these are the two paths. What's the struggle I'm willing to endure? What's the rewards of each? Gather the data to make the decision on this is the rewards I seek, this is the struggle I'm willing to endure, and then choose that decision. And when you step on the path, really embodying that, don't think of it in the lens of pass fail. Think of it from the lens of versions. So whatever path you take, you're going to hit some roadblocks. That's inevitable. But this is just an iteration. So everything is an experiment and an iteration. When you view life through that lens and business through that lens, okay, this didn't go I want, got it. What did I learn from this? Break it down. Because ultimately all growth is two things. Find the problem, fix the problem, find what's working, and do more of it. So as you go down this path of the struggle you're willing to endure, find the problem, fix the problem, find what's working, do more of it, and iterate, experiment, and then keep thinking of yourself in versions instead of a pass fail. So this will lead me to version 2.0, 3.0, so on and so forth.
Great.
Where can people connect with you and the work that you're doing with Fearvana?
You can find me on Instagram at Fearvana, Fearvana. The book is on Amazon, and on my website, Fearvana, I have a lot of resources and training to help people guide them to the next level of their own evolution.
Thanks, man.
Thank you both.
I've enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Real pleasure.
What I took away from that was when he was talking about how you determine which fears to embrace, which fears to pay attention to. So I think, for example, if there's a fear that, I was going to fail a test, it might make me study harder. So it might be positive. There may be fears that I want to embrace that have worthy aims, and just recognizing, what is this fear trying to prevent me from doing? Is it a worthy aim? Or is it something I should be rightly fearful of and pull back from? So I think evaluating those decisions and recognizing the fear is what I took away from it.
Yeah, my takeaway was the comment that he made about, I have this thought, but it's really more of like, what do I do with the thought that I'm having?
Mm-hmm.
There's no good or bad emotions. So I can have a thought. How I use that thought can be positive every time, as long as I use it that way. And so I can reframe in the future how to use emotions or thoughts or worries or concerns or excitements, whatever it is, in a way that is positively improving my life, even if the experience of feeling it might seem to not be positive.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision by subscribing to the show and leaving us a review wherever you're listening. We appreciate the support. It helps business owners like you find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com, on Instagram at decidedlypodcast, or grab a copy of Sanger and Sean's books from the links in the show notes. Finally, we'd like to thank Shelby Peterson of Transcend Media for editing and post-production of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm Morgan, your producer, and this is Decidedly.